This evening's meeting, the September 30th meeting of the Grafton Zoning Board of Appeals to order at this time. It's 7:02 p.m. As a preliminary matter, I'd like to confirm that all the members can communicate tonight. So when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Ms. DeRogers?
Yes.
Ms. Reed?
Yes.
Mr. Yeomans?
Yes.
Mr. Waller?
Yes.
Mr. Adams?
Yes.
Ms. Biswas?
Yes.
I see that Ms. Gonzalez, our first case, is here. Can you hear us and respond in the affirmative, please?
Yes.
Excellent. And I've already spoken with our secretary, but Katrina, if you could respond in the affirmative, please.
Yes.
Thank you. This open meeting of the Grafton Zoning Board of Appeals is being conducted remotely, consistent with the Legislative Acts of 2021, Chapter 20, Section 20, an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency. The meeting is convening by video conference via the Zoom app, as posted on the meeting agenda. Please note that this meeting is being recorded accordingly. Please be aware that other people may be able to see you and that you should take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast will be captured by the recording of this meeting. Please see the meeting agenda on the town website for details on how to participate remotely. The meeting will feature public comment. For public comment, request acknowledgement to speak, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom to request to speak. Meeting administrator will enable you to speak when it is your turn. For those on the phone exclusively, the audiovisual staff will coordinate with the meeting administrator to allow you to speak. For Zoom meetings, please note this meeting is being recorded and be published and rebroadcast. All participation within this meeting will be visible to others. Each vote taken in this meeting will be done by a roll call vote. So, with that out of the way, the first order of business is going to be case number 877. Victoria Gonzalez of 4 Gloucester Road, North Grafton, Mass. Is seeking a special permit and a variance. At this time, if the clerk could read the petition, please.
Is that me?
We find 877. I was starting with 875, so we're doing 877 first. Hold on.
I'm sorry.
Is it 875?
No, it's 877, 4 Gloucester Road.
I'm looking for it in my list.
It's only about 5 or 6 sheets.
Yeah, there's Katrina, I'm sorry, I don't see it. 877. I have 875 and 876.
It was in that second batch I sent you in the mail, Kay.
Is it on? Do we have it online?
Yeah, so if you go to the town's website.
So I can read it.
Yeah, would you? Thank you, sorry.
No problem. Legal notice. The Grafton Zoning Board of Appeals has received a petition from Victoria Gonzalez of 4 Gloucester Road, North Grafton, Mass. For a special permit and variance to allow the addition of a second story, addition of a front porch, and replacement of the existing garage on a pre-existing non-conforming structure within the front and side setbacks. Map 36, Lot 53. Board will conduct a public hearing on Thursday, September 30th, 2021 at 7 p.m. via Zoom to consider this request and or take whatever actions necessary, including the granting of a finding, special permit, variance, or other necessary relief allowed under the zoning bylaw. Any person wishing to be heard in conjunction with this request should appear at the time and place designated or by letter to this board in time to be read at the hearing. Please note, individuals requiring special accommodations should contact the Zoning Board of Appeals at 508-839-5335, extension 1154, at least 7 days prior to the hearing date in order to facilitate your request. Zoning Board of Appeals, William McCusker, Chairman, Marianne DeRogers, Vice Chairman, Kay Reed, Clerk, William Yeomans, Brian Waller, Peter Adams, and Natalie Biswas. This notice was properly posted and advertised. So I did kind of go out of order a little bit on my cheat sheet here. So what I should have said is I will now ask the board to introduce themselves. So if you would please introduce yourselves. My name is William McCusker. I'm the chairman of the Zoning Board of Appeals. Ms. DeRogers.
My name is Marianne DeRogers. I'm vice chairman.
Ms. Reed.
Hey, Reed, clerk.
Mr. Yeomans.
Bill Yeomans, member at large.
Mr. Waller.
Brian Waller, member at large.
Mr. Adams.
Peter Adams, alternate.
Ms. Biswas.
Matali Biswas, alternate.
So at this point, the clerk has read the petition, or I did. No, the way it would proceed is the clerk will read the petition, and after the clerk has read the petitioner will have the floor and have the opportunity to present their case. There will be a 15-minute time limit for the petitioner. This time limit cannot be extended with the consent of the board. The petitioner shall present required information, and all comments should be specific. Anyone wishing to speak in favor of the petition will have an opportunity to do so. Letters in favor will be acknowledged. Anybody in opposition will be allowed to speak, and any letters in opposition will be acknowledged. The opposition will also have a 15-minute time limit. After all the evidence is presented, the board will enter discussion and hopefully come up with a decision. Anyone wishing to speak, as previously mentioned, please use the raise hand feature of Zoom to request to speak. The board may ask questions from time to time. However, all conversations should be directed through the chair. At any time during this hearing and prior to a decision being made by this board, the petitioner has the option to request that the petition be withdrawn without prejudice or continued until a later date at which further evidence in favor of the petition can be provided. So at this point, we've already read the petition. I'll ask if anyone of the sitting members needs to recuse themselves for this case.
No.
Hearing none, then the five sitting members will vote, and at this time, the applicant has the floor.
Can you still see me? Because my face went away somehow.
We can hear you.
You can see part of the way. I'm sharing the screen so they can see your plot plan, Victoria.
Okay, but I could talk then.
Yep, absolutely. Go ahead.
Okay, so we bought the house in 2014. My husband's grandparents bought the house when it was built in 1954. It was actually the demo home on the hill, so they were the only ones that lived there. And they both had actually passed away in the house right before we bought it. So it was a little too hard for my husband to move in right away. We were also newly engaged with no kids. So now we have 2 kids, 2 babies, and a 3rd baby on the way. So we need more space. So that's the reason for the addition. We're not going past what's already the existing lines. And then the front of the house has 2 cement stoops. I'm not really sure what their purpose was. So we just want to put a small porch where the stoops were. So that's the reason for the addition. It's our growing family.
Okay. First of all, Katrina, are you actually sharing anything right now besides your desktop?
No, I was trying to share the screen. Can you see it yet?
Yeah, well, now we can see. I can see now. I can see the plot plan.
Okay.
Before it was just your desktop.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. Okay. So the petitioner is asking for 2 things here. One is a special permit to extend, alter, modify a pre-existing non-conforming structure. The other request is for a variance, and the variance is for the front porch, and I believe that front porch is going to be 4 feet. Is that, or 14 feet?
No, 4, just where the cement, sorry, this.
Yeah, so a 4-foot wide front porch. And that is in the front setback. So that's why, and that does not exist today. So that's why the need for the variance. So let's talk about the special permit for a moment, because that's probably the easiest piece. Do we know when the house was built? You may have just said that, and I didn't necessarily write it down.
1954.
Okay. And I think the nonconformity is that it's 5.6 feet off of the side lot line, and it's 19.4. No, looks like it's 22.5 off the front lot line. Is that correct?
Correct.
Oh, I'm squinting to look at the screen. I got it right here. 22.5, I think, is the closest, yeah. Off the front, where 30 feet's required. So that makes it a pre-existing non-conforming structure. If we don't talk about the porch for a moment, the second floor addition you're talking about putting on is all going to be within the footprint of the current house, correct?
Correct.
How many bedrooms does the house have right now?
3 small bedrooms.
And how many baths?
2.
And then the new house will have how many bedrooms and baths?
4 bedrooms and 3 baths.
Okay. I think that's the information we need with respect to the special permit. With respect to the variance, the variance is basically what you're doing is you're asking for us to carve out an exception in our bylaw specifically to you and to this site, right? The bylaw says you can't build within 30 feet of of your front lot line, and that's called the setback. You already have part of your house there. That's part of what makes it pre-existing non-conforming, but you want to do even more. That's where the variance comes from. Essentially, you're asking for permission to bypass the law. The state allows that to happen by way of the variance process, but it's very specific as to when we can allow that to happen. There has to be, in simple terms, there has to be something about the shape, topography, soil conditions of your land that's very unique to your land that makes essentially a hardship such that the only place you can put this, whatever it is you want to do, is in the setback or whatever it is you're trying to do. I suspect you don't necessarily know if you have any of those situations or even what the hardship might be. Do you have anything that you can offer us in that regards?
So the way the house is now, it shows it on the plot plan. It has these 2 huge cement stoops in the front that have always been there since the house was built. So we don't want to go past those cement stoops. We just want to remove the stoops and put a porch where those stoops were. So it wouldn't necessarily. It's not going past what was there. It's just kind of replacing those stoops with a porch instead.
Yeah, but you're going to go across the whole length of the front of the house, whereas right now the stoop is just in front of the door, right?
There's 2. So there's one on the kind of the left side. I have no idea why. I think there's actually 2 front doors to the house. So there's, if you look on the plot plan, there's 2 stoops. I don't even know how far apart they are from each other. One's on the left side of the house, one's on the front side.
Yeah. Okay.
But
But the porch is going the length of the house, as it's shown on the print.
I think about half, 3/4 of the length of the house, but mostly the length of the front of the house.
Okay. The drawing shows it going across the whole thing. So you're increasing. It's not like you're just replacing the stoop. It's not like you're just building something over the stoop. So you're increasing what's in the setback, unfortunately.
Okay.
Okay. Questions from the board? Comments from the board? Questions from the board? Katrina, see, I can't see mode.
One question, Bill.
Yep.
I know it's been a while, and it's to do with that, the stoop I take is the front steps. And
Yeah.
the front steps are part of the house. Isn't it considered part of the house?
Yes.
For distances?
I believe it is.
So the house is already 19.4 feet from the street?
Correct.
So they're not actually... No?
I thought you were kind of going to, my understanding is the stoops don't count towards the setback, so,
I thought they did. But I'm not positive. That's why I'm asking. If you...
yeah. But regardless, if the issue here was only covering the stoop, essentially using the same footprint as the stoop, then I think we could argue that there's no increase, but that's not what they're talking about doing. I mean, as you see on the print, they're showing a porch going basically the length of the house, well, to the garage, from the garage to the other end.
Right.
And that's definitely an increase. So that's where the variance comes in. I'm not sure about
I
your
thought
point,
I thought our architect had thought the same thing too in the plot planner, that the stoop would be included in the pre-existing because of how far the stoop goes out to the street.
It's possible, but again, if you were just building on top of the stoop, then you wouldn't even need the variance. But because you're expanding it, you need the variance. That's why you need the variance.
Okay.
And that's coming from the zoning enforcement officer.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I did check with Bob today, even though there's not a zoning determination on this. I did check with him today, and to do the second floor is a special permit. To do the porch on the front of the house is a variance.
Bill, I have a question.
Go ahead, please.
The door stoop to the left as you're looking out towards the road, that now comes out, it looks like another 2 feet out into the front setback. And so, while it measures the whole front of the house, I mean, that is going to be removed. And the other stoop that is now by the garage, that is going to be removed. So there's some relief there as far as the structure that's in the front setback that, once this new porch is put on, will not be there. I think that they could have coming out of that front entrance a porch, I believe, that is more significant than the one that's shown on the existing plan. She has the concrete pad there on both sides, but it's not just a walkout. I mean, you can have a good sized landing that's considered, and the setback, as I recall, goes from the boundary of the house, to the front of the street. So if they were not to have a porch there, then they could have an entrance and a landing that's much larger than the existing one. So I don't see that it's in any way a detriment. And I think that, considering that on both of those, that with the proposed garages, with its existing stoop to the right, where it shows it as 22.5 feet back, both of those entrances to the house could have not just a little walkout, but you can have a fairly significant landing there, and you could have a landing with a stairway going off to the side and a stairway going out to the front of the house. So, I mean, I think that, this is, to me, it's a more reasonable approach, considering what they could do by right with the existing, and they could enlarge that. That's an exit, and it's not just confined to something that's 3 feet wide going down the stairs. I mean, you can have a significant landing. Perhaps Peter can think about that a little bit more with his knowledge. So
Well-
I
my understanding is that, you know, the house is the house structure is a certain line. That's what has to be outside the setback. You can have a set of stairs leading from your front door down to the grade level. And my understanding was those don't count towards infringing on the setback. They have 2 of those now, yes. When they put a front porch on, a 4-foot front porch, that essentially becomes more of the house structure. That's more into the setback than what they are now. And you still need to have a set of steps coming off that front porch to get down to grade, right? I mean, you know, the front porch is not going to have no way to get to grade. So, you know, those steps that are there now are just basically being pushed out 4 feet so that, you know, you can get down off the porch. Regardless, you know, the building inspector has said a variance is needed, and, you know, as we know, there's certain requirements that are required to obtain a variance. And, you know, I'm not seeing it here at all. I think this is just something they would like. You know, I was up there today, drove all around the neighborhood, saw only 2 other houses with front porches on them. You know, I have no idea, of course, whether those are permitted or whether they're, you know, in the setbacks or not. You know, I think we have to be respectful of what is required for a variance, and there really is, you know, there's nothing unique about this piece of land that's causing them to have to build this porch. There's no hardship if they don't have the porch. They still can build a house. They still can have all the bedrooms they need. You know, I get it. I love front porches. It's something that I would really like too, but the bylaw's pretty clear. We have setbacks for a reason, and, you know, I don't believe we're meeting the requirements for the variance. Special permit, no problem. I mean, as we know, but I just don't see us meeting that requirement. You go into that neighborhood, the builder was pretty good about setting a building line. All the houses are on it. I said, in that whole neighborhood, I only saw 2 other front porches on similar ranch houses, a couple streets over. You know, it just doesn't, you know, I'm not seeing the variance qualifications in this situation. Further comments from the board? So where do we want to go with this? I suppose we have to do 2 separate motions because one is for a special permit, one's for the variance. You know, for findings, I think we've got some of the basic ones for the special permit. As far as built in 1954, preceding the zoning, we've got the side and front setback issues. That makes it pre-existing non-conforming. It's basically a house now. It's going to be a house when it's finished, so I don't think there's any increase in the non-conforming, and there is no increase in the non-conforming nature. There is no detriment to the public, so I think we've got those findings. You know, if this is in the water supply protection overlay, I assume it is not, but sometimes I'm surprised. I don't think it is.
It's not, Bill.
Okay.
I already checked it.
All right, thank you. So, you know, with those findings, I'd entertain a motion to grant the special permit to add a second floor. I think it's basically what's in it legal. To say Exhibit 1, which is, I'm trying to find some way to identify this drawing. I guess it's the August 17th, 2021 drawing by Jarvis Land Survey.
so moved.
Somebody want to say second, please?
Second.
Thank you.
I was on
Further
mute.
discussion? Okay, hearing no discussion, no further discussion, on a roll call vote, Mr. Rogers,
Yes.
Ms. Reed,
Yes.
Yeomans,
Yes.
Mr. Waller.
Yes.
Chairman votes yes. So the special permit's granted. For the variance, so I don't have any findings with respect to the unique soil condition, shape, topography. And I don't even necessarily have a hardship. Anyone want to help me out here in any way, or?
Well, if I may comment, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, please.
I look at the two existing porches that are there now, which are in the front, they are in the front setback. The whole house is closer to the street than what's allowed in the 30-foot front setback. And I feel that those two stoops could be, and that they look like they're probably 4 feet wide and it extends out 4 feet. That could be a much larger landing there, and it could be, 4 feet going out just as a landing, if not further. I mean, you could justify, a landing that could be, 5 feet wide by 4 feet long, or 5 feet out by 4 feet long. And both of those are being removed. So I don't see that porch as, if there was nothing there, I guess I would be more sympathetic to it. I think the fact that they are taking what is already a pre-existing, non-conforming, porch it looks like it's extended out, quite a bit into that front setback. It's probably like 8 feet of the 19 feet. And, I look at that and say that it's kind of, in my mind, it's kind of a swap, a front porch with, you're still going to have a stairs going down of it, but you wouldn't require as big a landing. And the other question that came to mind as I looked at this myself is if there's any concern about sometimes a porch is put on and it's built into, we could condition that porch to not allowing it, as I understand our right to condition, not allowing it to be an enclosed porch, or if it's an enclosed porch now, not allow it to be expanded and used for living space in the house. Those are my thoughts on it.
So, Katrina, can I share? You're on mute, by the way.
Sorry. Yes, you should be able to share. I can stop my.
Your share.
All right, I'm done. So you should be able to share.
Let's disable participant screen sharing.
Oh, hold on.
All right, so let's not worry about it. I was just going to show a picture from Google of the house just to refresh my mind.
Go ahead.
I don't remember seeing these big stoops, and all I'm seeing is a typical front stoop, 2 steps in front of the door. So I'm not sure what the stoops are, but at the end of the day, I don't have any of the required findings for a hardship. And I really have and you all know this, I have a real issue with the integrity of our process. And if we don't have the required findings, I don't see how we can grant the variance unless we're going to just be prepared to grant variances anytime someone comes along and wants to do something that seems nice. And, for that reason, I'm against this. I don't think we can do this. It's just there's nothing there. And I'm more than willing to find it if somebody wants to help me. Mr. Adams?
I don't have the cure-all for this right now. Hardship of the land is always the hardest. And I went by there and I was trying to find one. I had a hard time. If this were me, I think I would think about withdrawing this variance till a later time and do some research on it. Maybe look for other porches in the area and see how they got it. But if you withdraw, you can come back. If you don't and you get voted down, you got to wait 2 years. And in the meantime, they could carry on with putting the second floor on, because the front porch you can always put on afterwards. But that's just my thoughts, if it was me.
What's the sense of the board? It's an excellent point, and I understand that the applicant doesn't necessarily know these nuances, but it's a very valid point. If we vote on this and you're denied, you can't come back and ask for the porch for at least 2 years. You could ask to have it withdrawn, and it's withdrawn without prejudice, and you could reapply tomorrow if you thought you had some better information.
A continuance
the second
also?
floor addition is that you have the special permit for the second floor, no problem. Someone was saying something?
Could she ask for a continuance for?
She could also ask for a continuance if you think that you'd be able to provide more, better, different information at a subsequent hearing.
Is it because of the look of it? I'm just confused as to why, because the porch isn't coming out past those steps. So I'm confused as to why it would need a variance in the first place. Like it's not making the front, it's not coming closer to the yard. I mean, this tree isn't even there anymore. We removed that tree, so you can't see the other steps that well. But so that's what I was saying too, like how far apart those steps are. The porch would be from step to step and those few feet over, but it's not coming out any further to the street. Like it would just be where those cement steps are. It'd be like putting a roof over the cement steps.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the zoning enforcement officer would explain that the steps themselves don't really count for something being in the setback. What you're doing is you're building an additional structure in the setback. The house is supposed to be 30 feet off the street. That's what our bylaw says. It's your house is 22 feet off the street, and you want to essentially make it so it's only 19 off the street, and that's where the variance comes in.
Bill.
What's the sense of other members of the board?
Bill.
Yeah.
It's Kay Reed. So maybe I understand what Victoria's asking. If the porch was, say, allowed to be the same width as the actual steps and where they land on the yard, what if the landing of the new porch went off to the side? So the landing didn't come out further towards the street, but it went off to the side. So it's not expanding that distance towards the street.
Yeah, these are questions for Mr. Berger.
Mr. Berger's here.
He's the one who's saying a variance is needed. Well, maybe we can hear from Mr. Berger and explain why a variance is needed.
Okay, let me, I can't get my start video. Here I am. Okay, so I know I'm jumping in late. Thank you for inviting me in. When you have a pre-existing non-conforming structure, you need to have a special permit under 3435. And back, if I'm not mistaken, in 2014, the courts have determined that if that structure is increasing the nonconformity of the pre-existing structure, then you would also need a variance. So for an example, if the front of the house was supposed to be 30 feet and it's only 10 feet and you want to put a porch on that and you want to encroach another foot into it beyond what is already existing, that's where you would need the variance.
Mr. Berger, Mr. Yeomans has been pointing to the steps, although we don't have it documented, he seems to be indicating that the steps stick at least 4 feet into the front yard beyond what the house does, and why isn't that is that part of the nonconformity? And if the new porch was the same depth as the steps, why essentially I think he's saying why is a variance needed at all?
Under our bylaw, I think it's 3334 could be 3.333. You're allowed to encroach on your setback for steps, but not for open porches. So that kind of just threw that in its own separate item now, is the step doesn't get the advantage of being able to encroach on whatever setback you have, because it actually says not for open decks.
So the steps, essentially, the steps don't count when we're measuring the setback, but the porch does count.
The steps can encroach on a setback by no more than 3 feet.
Oh, okay.
A question, Mr. Berger.
Yes.
Bob, how wide could that? They can't encroach on the setback by more than 3 feet. But
For the step.
For the step.
That's
For
right.
the step. Okay, so, but now I have a landing. I have a landing that is a safety factor. So I come out of the house onto a landing, then I have steps going down. How wide could that landing be?
I keep on taking my mouse and moving it to the picture, and you guys can't see what I'm doing. That front door has a landing on it right now. And then it has 2 steps going down to it.
Okay, right.
So that already has a landing right now.
Yeah.
The codes have changed since they built this house. So the landing now, if you were just going to put a landing in there, has to be at least 3 feet deep and as wide as the doorway.
What is the restriction on the width? I want to make it 3 feet deep, which by code, and that might not be 3 feet, but if they replace it, they have to do it to code, I would assume, correct? So it would have to be 3 feet wide in a minimum. How wide can I make that? In other words, that landing is now going to be by code 3 feet. How wide can I make that?
You can if you're gonna call it a landing, the requirement for that landing is it has to be at least as wide as the door.
So you make it as wide as the house. What Bill's saying is he wants to make it as wide as the house.
That's not a landing. That's now an open deck.
Okay, let's assume that I don't take the full width of the house, that I'm going to come out to a landing, and I'm going to have let's say 3 feet to the left and 6 feet. I wanted to go over 6 feet, so it's underneath the window that's hidden.
Right.
Mr. Yeomans, I'm gonna bring an end to this, all right? Because we're not here to design what this applicant is asking for.
Okay, I agree.
Okay? She's asking for a porch. The zoning enforcement officer has determined that she needs a variance to put this porch on. I don't think there's any doubt that she needs a variance, and I think that's what we need to act on. Look, I love front porches, and I would put one on my house if I could, but a variance is what's required. Could I just get a sense of others on the board, how they feel here, whether she meets the requirements or not? And what I want to do is try and give her a sense of whether she should ask to withdraw or not, without actually advising her.
Yeah,
Anyone else want to volunteer?
Yeah,
Yep.
I agree with you. It's unfortunate, but I do agree with Mr. Berger too. Basically, the porch becomes part of the structure. So, and that's why it encroaches into the front setback. I mean, does it make, I don't know, it's just, does it seem fair? No, but that's the law, and you're right, we can't just, arbitrarily apply it. So unfortunately, I do agree with you, Bill.
Okay. Anyone else want to comment? Ms. Gonzalez,
So then I don't understand how other houses in the area have porches, because I've been in that neighborhood a lot too, and other houses have porches. I mean, no one's ever lived in this house besides its grandparents. So can these houses just never have porches? They just have to stay the way they are? I mean, I don't understand. I feel like neighborhoods get built up, they get made to look nicer, and this house can never have a porch on it. I don't understand.
So, I can't speak. First of all, I drove your neighborhood, and I don't think there's anyone on your street that has one. But regardless, there was only a couple that I saw, and as I said, I don't know whether those were permitted, whether they were put on before zoning. I can't speak to how they got them. I'm sorry. But what I can tell you is, variance requires what's called a supermajority. You would need 4 affirmative votes. You need 4 yes votes out of the 5 voting members. I think it's you've seen an indication out at least 2 of us are going to vote no. So you may want to consider withdrawing the request, or if you'd like us to proceed and vote, we can. As Mr. Adams pointed out, if you are denied, it just means that you wouldn't be able to reapply for a variance for the porch for 2 years.
You're saying that it's, if what's the difference between now and 2 years? You're saying that there's no need for a porch, so.
Yeah, probably. Fortunately.
Are you saying maybe in like a year if laws change? Like, I don't understand if I withdraw, like what's the point in, what's the even point in that if you're saying it's not approved?
Yeah, I
there's
think
no
the
need for
reality
it.
is, I think the reality is nothing will change. What Mr. Adams was headed towards was you might be able to hire an attorney and do some research and maybe come up with the required findings that we need. Maybe there's something unique about your lot. I don't know. So you could make an argument somehow if you wanted to talk to some professionals about this. Is really what I think Mr. Adams was suggesting. You could ask to continue, and we'll push it off a month. And you want to talk to some professionals again and see if anyone can give you some good, get you the findings or whatever it is to meet the requirements. We could do that as well. I'll be happy to continue it to our next meeting, which will probably be a month or so from now.
Okay.
I'm going to try and talk to some people, see if we can come up with a better idea. We can do that as well. Be happy to do that. And in the meantime, you've been granted a special permit, so we can get that filed with the clerk and start that process so you can at least start the construction on the 2nd floor.
Okay.
Help you.
Yes, we waited about 5 years to do this, so I would like to do the continuation.
Absolutely.
Perfect.
So, that in mind, I think, Katrina, we have 2 cases pending that will need dates. You're on mute.
Yes, we do. So the earliest, because I need 3 weeks to publish the legal notice. I mean, if I came in tomorrow and got it done, but if more than likely next week I could get the legal notices in for the 2 new cases. The earliest we could do is October 28th, which is a month.
All right. Anybody have a problem with October 28th?
I will be out of town October 28th.
I'm not
But-
available that day either.
Can the 2 alternates fill in for me and Brian?
I hate to go into it with 5. How about the 27th, Wednesday?
Out of town. I'm out of town for like 10 days towards the end of October.
Okay. Brian?
I'm available both of those dates.
Could we do after that following week after the 28th, like 4th?
Sure. Want to shoot for the 4th? Is the 4th better, Kay?
Yes, I'll be back.
Okay. How's the 4th look for everyone?
Good.
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 All right. So I'd entertain a motion to continue case number 877 to November 4th at 7 p.m.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. We have to do this on a roll call as well. Ms. DeRosiers,
Yes.
Ms. Reed,
Yes.
Mr. Yeomans,
Yes.
Mr. Waller.
Yes.
Chairman votes yes. Okay, so we'll see you November 4th. See if you can talk to some people, talk to your builder, see if they come up with some ideas to meet the requirements for a variance. The requirements were in the packet that you should have received from Katrina, but she could give them to you again if you want to stop in and see her so you know exactly the requirements. In the meantime, we will also type up and file a decision for the special permit so we can get that on gonna get that rolling for you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. I exit the meeting now, correct? Or
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
you can leave. Yes.
Okay.
We're not gonna make you stay here.
okay.
You're all
Thank you
done,
very much.
Victoria.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yep. All right. Next order of business is case number 876, which is oh, wait a minute. Is Graves Engineering on with us? Is Jeff on anywhere?
Not yet.
Let's see.
He said he could be here at 8 o'clock.
All right, then we'll start with we'll go right into Wyman, and then we'll do the 240Bs after that.
And you have Centennial too. The withdrawal.
Yeah. Out of the way. From the Wyman team, I just want to make sure, are they on?
Two of them are Sam Hemingway and Richard Bakari are. I don't know where the rest of them are. I mean, I have 21 participants in here, so bear with me one
Yeah, I
second.
see that. How about the attorney?
I don't see their attorneys in here yet. I don't know where they are.
Mr. Bakari, is your team here ready to go?
Yes, I see that my attorney, Michael Brangwine, is in the attendees section of the Zoom. And Scott Thornton, the traffic engineer, is also in that section. I don't know if they maybe clicked on or if they got a different invite than the rest of us. And I'm not sure where Mark Donahue is, but I know Mike Brangwine works with Mark Donahue. So they're raising their hand. I see Mike raising his hand in the attendee section. So I don't know how we transfer him into this section, but definitely need him involved.
I sent them all the same link that I sent you, Richard, so I don't know why they're in as attendees and not panelists.
But can't you escalate them or elevate them or?
I can try.
I know the planning board knew how to do it Monday.
Oh, wait, hold on. Yep. Give me a sec. Promote to panelist. Mike, promote to panelist. And who else did you want me to promote to panelist?
So you have Mike
Scott.
and Scott. Yep.
So Mike was in there twice.
Hi, yes. Hello, members of the board. Katrina, I didn't realize that we were in a different section of the Zoom. I thought we would be elevated once it was our turn. I apologize. Maybe we did. I think, Katrina, you had sent me a link, but whatever the case may be. The other Mike Brangwin is just so if I need to share my screen, I have another computer with some files on there. So if you could elevate that.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know why it's not letting me promote to panelist.
Oh, I have to accept. Thank you. All set.
Okay.
Okay, so let me get back to my cheat sheet here. Next item of business is case number, as I said, 876, which is requesting a variance for the Wyman Gordon property to build a warehouse. I will now ask the board to introduce themselves. My name is William McCusker. I'm the chairman of the ZBA. Mr. Rogers?
Marianne DeRozier, Vice Chair.
Ms. Reed?
Kay Reed, clerk.
Mr. Yeomans?
Bill Yeomans, member at large.
Mr. Waller?
Brian Waller, member at large.
Mr. Adams?
Peter Adams, alternate.
Ms. Biswa?
Natalie Biswas, alternate.
And also with us, Ms. Koshebo?
Koshvo, CBA secretary.
Mr. Berger?
Robert Berger, zoning enforcement officer.
The way we will proceed is that the clerk will read the petition, and after the clerk has read the petitioner will have the floor and will have the opportunity to present their case. The 15-minute time limit for the petitioner. Time limit can be extended with the consent of the board. Petitioner shall present required evidence. Required information in all comments should be specific. Anyone wishing to speak in favor of the petition will have an opportunity to do so. Letters in favor will be accepted and acknowledged. Anybody in opposition will be able to speak, and any letters in opposition will also be accepted and acknowledged. Opposition will also have a 15-minute time limit. After all the evidence is presented, the board will enter discussion and will come up with a decision. At any time during this hearing, prior to a decision being made by the board, the petitioner has the option to request that the petition be withdrawn without prejudice or continued until a later date, at which time further evidence in favor of the petition can be presented. Anyone wishing to speak, because we're on Zoom, we ask that you use the raise hand feature of Zoom. And if you're on the phone, we should be able to coordinate with our AV people. Board may ask questions from time to time. However, all conversation should be directed through the chair. Like all comments to be specific to the issues at hand. At this time, I'd ask the clerk to read the petition.
The Grafton Board of Appeals has received a petition from Wyman Gordon Company for 244 Worcester Street, requesting that the Zoning Board of Appeals grant a special permit or variance to allow the construction of a new 375,000 square foot warehouse facility with height variance of 5 feet, 35 feet allowed, 40 feet requested, and a parking variance where 750 are required and 234 are requested. Map 35, Lot 1, Block 0. The board will conduct a public hearing on September 30th at 7 p.m. in Conference Room A. A Zoning Board of Appeals, William McCusker, Chairman, Mary DeRosa's Vice Chair, Kay Reed, Clerk, William Yeomans, Member, Brian Waller, Member, Peter Adams, Alternate, and Vitaly Biswas, Alternate.
Thank you. And this was advertised and posted properly. Do any of the 5 permanent members of the board have any conflicts such that they need to recuse themselves? Hearing none, the 5 members will be voting. And at this time, I give the applicant the floor.
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Attorney Michael Brangwin on behalf of the applicant Churchill and Banks Companies, LLC. With me tonight is Richard Bakari, who's the principal of Churchill and Banks, Sam Hemingway, who's our engineer from Garofalo and Associates. Scott Thornton is also here, our traffic consultant from Vanessa and Associates. And I don't see him. Rich, is Andre Farhat joining tonight, or is he not going to be on? I think you're muted, Rich.
Yes, Andre and or Mike Hodorak should be joining. I know I got a call from Mike Hodorak, who from Eastern Retail Properties, and he's running a little bit behind. But when he is available, I will let you know.
Okay, great. And well, they may be speaking a bit later, but they're commercial brokers, real estate brokers. So the applicant, Churchill and Banks Companies, LLC, has applied for a zoning variance related to the construction of a new approximately 375,000 square foot warehouse facility at 244 Worcester Street. And if I'm able to share my screen, I can pull up just an overall image that will show the parcel in question, which is in the lower left-hand side that says new parcel in front of the Wyman Gordon facility, which I'm sure the board members are familiar with. I will just lead off by saying that the project that has been proposed requires site plan review and a special permit from the planning board, and will also need approval from the Conservation Commission. So there's some concurrent permitting process going on. We had our first meeting with the planning board earlier this week, and we've also met with the Conservation Commission. And we received some feedback at the planning board, and we're actively working through the issues that were raised at the planning board, some of which touch upon or are related to the relief that's requested tonight, namely parking, and also the really the issue I think that has some overlap that came up at the planning board is the issue of the end user of this proposed warehouse facility, and how that will impact traffic and also, to a certain extent, parking, the question of parking. So that being the case, the planning board, I believe, has retained an outside consultant that's going to be reviewing our traffic analysis, and we're going to be continuing to work through that process with the planning board. So in light of that ongoing process, we'd like to present our request for zoning relief tonight to the zoning board. But we do, with the expectation that likely the zoning board may wish to see the results of that process with the planning board, and perhaps the outcome of that review by the planning board's consultant with respect to traffic, and taking a closer look at the end user of the facility. So we certainly anticipate that perhaps the best outcome of tonight's hearing would be a continuance to allow that process to play out, and perhaps we could come back. But of course, we can discuss that with the board after our presentation. So a little bit about the project, or first about the applicant. Churchill and Banks is a privately held corporation. They're engaged in the acquisition, development, and construction of office, industrial, and retail residential properties in New England and also in North Carolina. The site, the applicant proposes the construction, as I mentioned, of a new warehouse facility on the existing Wyman Gordon premises. And the site where the warehouse is proposed is currently made up of a wooded area, parking for the existing Wyman Gordon facility, and an open field. As shown on the plans that we've submitted here with, and I'll switch to those now on my screen. Let me just switch pages here. So there we go. It looks like there's a little bit of a delay on the screen. The premises include a warehouse facility with 38 loading docks and accompanying loading spaces at the rear of the facility, 75 trailer storage spaces, and 234 proposed parking spaces. Operations at the premises would be expected to employ approximately 200 to 230 employees. And access to the site is via 2 access drives off of Worcester Street, one on the east side of the site and the second on the west side. Parking at the Wyman Gordon facility would be consolidated in an existing lot on the Wyman Gordon site, and would continue to satisfy the bylaw for the Wyman Gordon's parking facility needs. I will say, I'm speaking only to parking. There were initially, when we had filed this application, we had requested relief from 2 sections of the zoning code. We are withdrawing, after our discussion with the planning board, our request for zoning relief with respect to the height of the building. Initially, we had sought relief of 5 feet of a maximum building height in the office light industrial zoning district, where 35 feet is the maximum building height. The proposed building is 40 feet in height. However, after discussing with the zoning board, under section 3.3.2.2b of the bylaw, the planning board can in fact grant the requested height relief. Actually, in fact, they could grant up to height relief up to a 45-foot building if certain conditions are met, which I think they would be in this situation, in this proposed project. So we're going to be seeking that relief through the planning board, and we have withdrawn, and I submitted a letter today withdrawing that aspect of the relief that we've requested. So tonight we're really just here to request relief from the parking requirements that would otherwise apply to this project. Under the bylaw, 1 parking space is required per 500 square feet of gross floor area, which would result in the need for 750 parking spaces. And 234 parking spaces, as I mentioned, are currently proposed, and they're shown on the right side of the building, the warehouse building, on the plan that's up on your screen now. I will say that the size and configuration of the site prevent a proposal that would allow for the requisite 750 parking spaces, which would be necessary to operate a warehouse facility at the site. And I will just note that the zoning bylaw with respect to parking requirements for warehouse facilities, we would suggest is a bit outdated. When compared to surrounding communities, the trend in the industry has been towards automation, as I'm sure the board is aware, which results in fewer employees and the need for fewer parking spaces. For example, a similar use, which actually the Wyman Gordon facility falls under the transportation, industrial, and utility use under the bylaw, requires 1.3 one parking space per 1.3 employees during the maximum shift. And if that were applied to this building, it would require approximately 177 parking spaces, where we have proposed 234. If the zoning bylaw were applied, really it would just result in more than 500 just extra unnecessary parking spaces that wouldn't be used, would create additional impervious surface at the site, and the problems associated with that, loss of any potential landscaping areas, runoff, additional drainage, the things that go along with unnecessary parking spaces, where that space could otherwise be used in a way that was more efficient or better for the use of the property. So it's based on the site in question. It would, as I said, based on the shape and the orientation of the lot, it's our position that it would be impossible, really, for any warehouse operator to come up with a configuration that would be able to provide the requisite parking under the zoning bylaw and operate a warehouse facility, really, in any way that would be competitive in the marketplace. And at this point, I'd like to have our team speak to some of their areas of expertise. As I mentioned, we have our engineer here, Sam Hemingway. He's going to speak first, and he's going to talk a little bit about the site plan that we came up with and why we configured it the way that we did, and how we ended up with the parking spaces where they are. So Sam, you can take over. If you'd like me to stop sharing, I can do that, or if you'd like to take control of the screen, or I can pull up any plan images you'd like.
Well, I guess it's probably a little bit easier for me to share the screen. That way you can see the cursor, should I elect to use it. Is that something we can do? We're back to the aerial image. Is everybody seeing that?
That's what I'm seeing.
Okay, so I'm going to keep this at a very high level. There are a lot of issues here, obviously, that are being considered by the planning board and the commission that I don't want to get too deep in and drag a lot of time and discussion on. But I would like to kind of give the broad brush. So the overall property is about 185 acres as delineated here on the property. The existing Wyman Gordon facilities, the plan itself is in the center of the property. The subject of this application is about 26 acres located in the southwest portion. It's roughly 40% impervious, being a large parking field in the central portions of the lot. There is a guardhouse and security station in that location. The administration building is here. And then there are several remote parking fields associated and truck areas associated with the plan itself in the rear. This next figure really just kind of zeroes in and highlights the small portion of the overall property that we're talking about. Obviously, both properties are impacted, and we have zoning information on both of those. The project is going to occur in 2 stages or so. As you can imagine, the first stage will be to consolidate Wyman Gordon's facilities outside of the development zone. So this portion of the property can be transferred and developed in a manner consistent with the application. So this lot in the back reflects the new parking facilities for the Wyman Gordon. As you can see, this entire area of parking is being displaced. There's in the order of magnitude, there's about 400 spaces reduction in the project with a transfer back to the rear of the property. Some other linear improvements along the existing Wyman Gordon administration building will be provided to allow for circulation around the building for fire protection and for displacement of a small number of remaining vehicles. And the entrance location will be sited to the eastern ends of the development lot for the purposes of constructing a combined facility to serve the overall project. So after that first stage occurs, the development area will be ready effectively to be segregated and developed for this warehouse use. It's a wholly independent use, but it does have the shared elements of the drives and circulation patterns that you would expect for the overall property and the extent of the industrial zone. What we have done, as Mike had indicated, the proposal is to site a large warehouse building basically parallel to the street. The front setback, we provided a slightly larger than required front setback such that we can install suitable landscaping and berming to transition from the road to the building. We believe the aesthetics of the building itself will be addressed in a manner to break up the large scale, but the physical nature of the building will actually provide a good buffer to the most of the activity, the industrial activity on the site, which will be between the Wyman Gordon facilities and the new facilities here. So most of the operations will occur in this back location here. As Mike also indicated, there is obviously a need for employee parking. The current trend for facilities of this nature, which is a warehousing operation, is significantly less than the 700 spaces required under the bylaw. So although we don't have a specific tenant in mind, we do have a target industry with fairly standard or at least regular relationships of parking, of employee counts, shift sizes, and activity and truck number of stalls and stored vehicles in relation to the building area. So we've tried to maintain that standard with the layout, provide a good buffering on the building, and we've estimated that 234 parking spaces for the employee and visitor parking is a suitable relationship to the building. There are, if you drill to the specifics of the application, there are a handful of additional spaces related to fleet vehicles and other vehicles related to the business activities that won't be in the lot. They'll be in the secured area and the rear. So 240 is actually the total parking spaces that we have proposed on the plan. The remaining pictures that I have here, I'm not going to get too deep into them, but obviously this is a site plan indicating the dimensional requirements of the project. The pavement area here is well below the pervious coverage requirement or the landscape requirement for the property. The western portion of the lot is constrained by regulated areas, so by wetland resource areas, associated buffers and no-build zones, and also wooded areas and utilities that need to be maintained or that we recommend maintaining with the project. There is a constraint on the eastern end of the project related to the major utility corridor going back and servicing the Wyman Gordon facilities. So there's a large gas main, a large water main that services the rear, precluding reconfiguration and other ways that might change the relationship as it's proposed. This is a grading plan. Without getting too deep into the specifics, you can see by these contours, the building is dropped between 4 and 5 feet below the fronting street, but we've maintained an area of berming adjacent to the road to try and soften the view of the building and transition from the road and the abutting properties towards a structure, and then ultimately towards the lower side of the facility, which will be the loading areas. They'll be well below the finished floor, so that the back of the property will be roughly 10 feet below the street as it currently occurs. And then the final thing to note, this is a utility plan. There are 2 large areas of stormwater management towards the back of the property. Those provide both vegetated area and buffering, but also meet the requisite requirements for stormwater management that, as was indicated, the specifics of that have been discussed with Conservation Commission and the Planning Board, but more critically, are currently under the peer review process. We will work with the peer review consultant to make sure that all of the concerns that they have, that they might bring up, or questions they have on the materials that we've developed, get thoroughly addressed and are incorporated into the plan. So I think that's the 10,000 foot level overview. I'm here and happy to talk more about any specifics. I think there are other people here more qualified to talk about the specific requests for parking and the numbers, should you like to hear more on that information as well. Hopefully that's all clear, and I'm going to stop sharing if I can figure out how.
Thank you, Sam. And I believe Scott Thornton is here, our traffic consultant. He's going to speak a little bit to the issue of traffic and visits to the property.
Thanks, Mike. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, for the record, my name is Scott Thornton. I'm with Vanessa Associates, and we prepared the traffic assessment for the project. And Mike, I don't know, do you have traffic slides?
Yep, I can pull those up.
It's really just the, I think just the trip generation slide. It's probably the 3rd slide in. That's the critical one. For the members of the board, we did prepare a traffic assessment consistent with state and local guidelines. And without getting too much into that, we did estimate traffic based on a conventional warehouse that is what we know at this point for the development. That said, there's a certain number of vehicle trips that are anticipated with a conventional warehouse. This is based on the ITE trip generation manual, which is the required use in both the town zoning bylaw, as well as for any projects that are on state highway that are undergoing any type of state review, which this project will. So I think the key slide regarding the parking has to do with the daily trips, and where we have a number of loading or trailer spaces that are in the back, but as it relates to the amount of vehicle parking that's proposed, the 234 to 240 spaces, we're anticipating over the course of a day, we're anticipating 412 daily trips for vehicles, for passenger vehicles. So of those 412, that represents one trip in and one trip out. So the total is more like 206 cars over the course of the day. And there may be different employee types. There's typically, there would be warehouse employees that sometimes work different shifts than conventional peak hour time periods. There may be something like 6 to 2:30 or 3 to 11, for instance. And office employees may be the more traditional time period of 8:30 to 5, 8:30 to 4:30, something like that. But the bottom line is that it's not likely that all of those spaces would be full at any one time. The 206 daily cars expected to travel to and from the site dovetails pretty well with the proposed parking supply of 240 spaces. And that parking ratio works out to be approximately 0.65 spaces per 1,000 square feet, as opposed to the town rate, which is 2 spaces per 1,000. We've been involved with, by we, I mean VAI have been involved with recent warehouse permitting efforts where, you know, there's been a couple in Bellingham that have been parked at a rate of, one's been parked at 0.28 spaces per 1,000 square feet, and another one's been parked at 0.75 spaces per 1,000 square feet. So as Mike had indicated, the trend is definitely for fewer employee parking spaces with these uses. And as you know, as crunches continue with labor shortages and an inability to find workers to staff the warehouses, that a higher degree of automation is sure to result. One other data point, the ITE parking generation manual, which is similar to the trip generation manual in that it is they've compiled a number of parking utilization studies at different land uses, including warehouses. That suggests a parking demand of about 145 spaces is typical for a warehouse use such as this, which is even lower than what's being proposed. So, you know, I think overall we feel that the proposed parking supply is appropriate for the building and provides the correct amount of the parking spaces for the future use of the building. So I'll be, you know, as Sam mentioned, I'll also be here for any questions, but I'll turn it back over to Mike.
Great. Thanks, Scott. And there we had, but I don't know if we have anyone from Eastern Retail. Richard, is anyone going to be joining from?
Yeah, they're available to join. I think, I mean, I don't want to belabor the same point over and over. I think they're going to share the same information that Scott basically just shared. And but if it's something that the board would like to hear tonight or maybe in the future regarding other projects similar to this and, you know, what those parking requirements have been or are, we can certainly add that to it, but I don't want to take up the board's time at this point. I would leave it up to the chairman to decide.
Thanks, Rich. And that we really just want, they were, if anything, would speak to, and we can submit some data on this if the board would like, but really just the parking requirements that in surrounding areas where similar uses that have fully adequate parking at a substantially lower ratio to square footage. So based on everything you've heard, it's our request that the board grant a variance with respect to the parking requirement to allow for 234 spaces where 750 would otherwise be required. And we're happy to answer any questions. As I mentioned, it was our thought that based on the discussion tonight, it may make sense to come back at a later hearing to have a further discussion, but we're happy to answer any questions from the board and hear feedback from the public or answer any questions you may have. So thank you.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. I'm gonna start, and I want to try and keep us on point here. The request is for a variance, and as certainly the board knows, and I'm sure the attorney knows, granting a variance requires three things in aggregate. There has to be something relating to the soil conditions, shape, and topography of the land, and that something has to be unique in the zoning district. And it has to be something that then causes a hardship So the hardship has to be directly related to that, whatever it is with the land. And if we find those two, then we can start talking about, essentially no substantial detriment to the public good in not nullifying the bylaw. In other words, is it consistent with the intent of the bylaw? But I think a lot of what we heard or a lot of what people are thinking is that third part, but we really need to focus on the first two parts. So I guess I want a little bit better explanation. What is the unique condition or circumstances with the land? And then let's talk about how that then creates a hardship. Can you expand on that at all?
Yes. I think Sam touched on this a bit in his presentation, but really the site, if looking at the site overall, in particular the developable area that of this parcel is somewhat confined by the area to the left here, which is basically woodland. And Sam, you can jump in after me and probably do a better job of describing why the site needed to be configured the way it was. But there's the restrictions from this area here, the side area, wooded area, the topography and the character of this piece of the land, and then also the utility restrictions on the right side really require the property, the development to be focused in this area where you see it on the screen. And, could you fit more parking if over here, theoretically, size-wise, perhaps you could, but it wouldn't be possible based on the site. So that really is why, and I think a combination of that, and maybe this ties in or segues into the idea of a hardship, is really looking at the kind of taking a step back and looking at the code specifically. The parking requirement is so high, and as we said, not really aligned with the current needs in the industry, the 750 parking spaces for a warehouse this size would really create a hardship really on any lot, even if we didn't have the restrictions that we're working with. But that makes this use essentially not feasible. And that really is the hardship Sam, I don't know if I hit on everything. If you have any follow up on, I guess we were taking them in order, but in terms of why the site was designed in the way that it was, and anything having to do with the lot that I didn't mention.
No, I think I'm not sure I would have used. I probably would phrase it differently, but at risk of probably being redundant, I'll say a little bit more in terms of clarification. It is the site constraints of the physical site constraints of this property being constrained in the back by an existing structure. So a limited width requirement of a utility corridor, which is virtually wholly constraining expansion of the lot farther to the east, and physical limitations to regrading or the subsurface conditions in the west towards the resource areas in a critically sensitive watershed. So those constraints combined effectively develop configure a development zone where compliance would not be possible.
So, again, constraints to the rear. I'm hearing that you just can't make the lot big enough. But I do see some land as we're looking at this picture to the left. Why can't you put parking in that land?
This land here? Oh, I'm sorry.
Here, Sam, you can use yours.
As you're looking from the street, the land to the left. So I guess that's the west. That's the west.
Yeah, that is primarily. So let me grab the screen. So I believe that you're speaking of this section of the property.
Yeah.
So there are a couple of really two major constraints. The first is the wetland resource area along the western boundary. So there is a small stream there which travels north towards the Flint Pond, so up along the western portion of the property. There are buffer areas associated with that, but also grade constraints associated with that, so that there's about a 10 or 12-foot drop down towards the stream and the wetland resource. There's also a town water line through an easement area that effectively aligns with that western entry. So there's a 12-inch water main that extends through the property and serves the property to the north of the railroad, which would similarly constrain further development in that area. So, we certainly looked at doing additional work in that area, but felt like it was a more than significant constraints to expanding the development.
So, so what I'm hearing is that there may be some wetland around there, and then I've heard something about, some grading issues. Neither one of those are unique within the zoning district, right? There's plenty of wetlands throughout Grafton. Grafton's not flat. This isn't Nebraska. So there's lots of up and down. So there's nothing unique there. So I'm not seeing what the unique shape, topography, et cetera, really is here. I think what I'm hearing mostly is the land is just too small. And the courts have been pretty clear that that's not, can't confuse size with shape. But let's talk about the hardship. The fact that you can't, the fact that you've got this situation, means you can't have the parking, but what's the hardship become?
Well, Mr. Chair, the hardship would be, I guess, building a building with 750 unnecessary parking spaces. It would be that essentially the whatever was developed, it wouldn't be competitive in this environment. It would essentially just requiring the applicant to construct parking spaces that wouldn't be used would be a hardship in terms of operating the property in any way that would be economically feasible.
Yeah, and again, the courts have also ruled on that as well. This idea of not really being feasible is not going to fly. That's already been ruled on. First of all, I believe the planning board has the ability to waive the actual construction of some parking spots. You just have to show that you've got the place to put them if you need them. I believe is how that works, but I'm not exactly sure on that. You've said a few times that the bylaw is outdated and it hasn't kept up, and we don't, you don't need this many spots for this size building, and that may be true. But the fact of the matter is our bylaw requires it, and part of the variance process isn't, the bylaw is outdated so we can grant the variance, right? It's just not part of it. So whether you think you need 700 spots or not, bylaw says you have to have them. And it doesn't really matter whether you think you need them or not. It really doesn't matter whether they're going to sit empty or not. The bylaw says you need to have them. If you made the building smaller, you would have more land than to put parking. Do you know how much smaller the building would have to be? Did anyone do those calculations?
I don't think we have those prepared tonight. I think it would be kind of a move. It would decreasing the size of the building. We could prepare those calculations certainly, but we don't have those for the board tonight.
Okay, so you really don't even know how much of a hardship it would be. You want a 375,000 square foot building and that's it. I'm not. So far, we struck out on two as far as I'm concerned. I'm not seeing anything unique about the soil condition, shape, topography, and we're really not seeing the hardship. I'm going to let it go with that. I know people are probably going to have a lot to say about the, essentially the public good piece of it. At this point, I'll turn it over to the board. Any comments or questions from the board?
I've got a couple, but I can let somebody else go first.
You spoke up, Peter.
Okay.
Please.
Getting back to that western part of the property to the west of the driveway. I know the engineer said there's a small stream going through there. Now, is the small stream way to the west or in the middle of it or near the driveway? The only reason I'm bringing this up, and I know you were talking about a 10 or 12 foot fill because it dips down, but I've heard people fill that kind of property all the time. So, and I know the stream, if you go in front of conservation, you'll probably have a buffer zone of 25 feet from edge of wetland. So have you calculated anything about putting parking over there?
Certainly, we looked at expanding into that area. There is, our biologist's not here tonight, but there is a stream area or a brook. There's a ponding area. There is an adjacent resource, although emergent wetland adjacent resource area. Those things combined, and you're exactly right, there's a 25-foot no build and a 100-foot buffer. We are proposing already within the 100-foot buffer in a number of locations. We have managed to stay wholly outside of the 25-foot no build, which we think is important from the standpoint of their obligations as well as DEP's in the act to maintain the resources. So we fully recognize if there was just the topo and no wetland resources, those would not be obstacles that we couldn't overcome with large walls, et cetera. I think that's true. But in this case, it's the physical constraints on four sides, which are, requiring the configuration, the fact that you have to load the truck on one side, the fact that we wanted the front against the street, that was constraining, just formulating a manner where a configuration of a warehouse facility, which is consistent with the intended use, we believe, the industrial zone, of trying to get something to fit in that property that wholly was compliant was not something that we were able to achieve. So we can get to the specifics. We had looked at some earlier versions with providing possible expansion of parking areas. I agree. I don't have a specific document compiled that I could present to the board, but we can certainly dig back into that information and get the specifics and have a more complete outline of this information moving forward.
My other question concerns your proposed employee parking lot. I've been in the snow business quite a while. I don't know how you're going to. Are you going to remove the snow? Is it snowing? I mean, the only place I can see putting this is over the line onto Wyman Gordon's property, or to the front, which I really don't want to see a 20-foot high snow pile against Worcester Street.
Yeah, no, and we agree. We've identified 4 areas, primary areas for snow storage on the site. One of them is, in fact, the common area. The entrance is a shared easement and utility corridor, and discussion of placing snow in those areas is, in fact, proposed. We similarly believe that that there are portions of the parking lot which will not be utilized. So that there's 60 feet adjacent to the parking lot on the south side. There's a snow storage area on the Wyman Gordon side in that lot. And then similarly in the truck areas, it's probably overlap with the trucks, but we recognize what you're saying and believe that we've identified snow storage areas that are adequate for the need.
If we have
we can enlarge them, certainly.
Yeah, if we have a January or February like we had 6 or 7 years ago, this is going to be a fun place.
That's right, and it's true. We recognize that and understand your concern.
That's it for me for now.
Yeah, I just want to clarify. It sounded to me like you said some of the snow storage is actually going to be in some of the parking spots. Is that what you said?
I think the circulation, but I think that there are areas for additional snow storage. Yes, I think that could happen. We're not planning for it, but I think that is, again, a safeguard. What we're trying to do is make a reasonable amount of bituminous storage. I think, frankly, we could, it wouldn't be unbeneficial to the project to reduce the size of the parking area and have vegetated snow storage areas, but that's not what's before you. So, you know, we think we landed at a large safety factor on the required parking with the application.
Just Mr. Yeomans?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with your comments made relative to the site and the lack of hardships and a special topography of the lot. A couple of thoughts came up relative to the 234 spaces that you seem to have come up with. You know, with, I think it was 180 employees. With multiple shifts, you get shift overlap. And, you know, so you've got people that are coming in to go to work, and you have other people that are finishing their shifts and they've not yet left. You know, I question whether the 234 parking spaces is even adequate to what you proposed. And to me, it looks like, okay, here's a building that we can put there to make the numbers work. And how many people are we going to have that will be employed there? So I bring that up as a point that the shift overlap, I think, you know, has to be figured into that. And that's a point. And as Peter just brought up, the snow, the potential for snow in that area is going to decrease the number of parking spaces, even if it were approved, if it were to be approved and considered, you know, not detrimental to the neighborhood, and the hardships could be proven, which I don't think is the case. Another question I have relative to, you talk about, are there any customer pickups? Customer pickups in vehicles and pickup trucks, small box truck, et cetera. They're not going to be going to the back. That appears to be an in and out situation with large tractor trailers. Would you anticipate customer pickup vehicles parking in that area to go into the warehouse to pick something up that it's an emergency, you know, I need that now. I can't wait for the shipment on the tractor trailer?
I don't know if I'm the best one to answer that, but certainly the final configuration, the user configuration of the rear loading of the truck areas, service areas in the back may vary somewhat, but the intent of the tractor court, which is the first portion in the secure area, so anybody going back into the business end of the warehouse would require to get through a security checkpoint. And that was the intent of that space on the eastern end of the building. So not for pickup of sales. I don't think that's a regular occurrence that we anticipate, but certainly fleet vehicles and operations, repair vehicles and the like, we would expect them to land in that area.
You bring up an interesting word that I see it's used in one of the supporting documents, whereas in the proposed use summary, and I'll just say significant changes are not anticipated in the future with respect to the proposed use or building structure. The maximum number of employees, hours of operation, and nature of deliveries is also not anticipated to significantly change in the future. What we've seen in recent years is, you know, really significant changes, you know, across the board. So, you know, I look at this and, you know, I think that, you know, what if what if and it's built on speculation, and you can't get the warehouse use to fill it up, then it can easily turn into something else. And I think at that point, Mr. Chair, it would be a different use that I think they'd have to, justify it. But I don't think we can change the bylaw. I think it says 750 parking spaces, and I agree with Chairman McCusker that what has been presented is not substantial. It's not a hardship. It's not the topography. And when you talk about possibly, I think Mr. Adams brought up possibly putting parking to the left of the main entrance for the truck entrance. I also recall that over the years, Wyman Gordon has done a lot of things relative to drainage and water. And so I think there may be some reasons over there that you could not, put parking over there. And that would obviously be something that would be taken up with the Conservation Commission. But,
Thank you.
I'll let it go on that basis.
Thank you. Further comments from the board?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So is the applicant's position that the only thing that's economically viable on this lot is a $375,000 or 375,000 square foot warehouse?
No, Member Waller, that's not our position. I think Sam touched on this earlier. A warehouse is a use that's allowed in this district. It's our position that applying the zoning requirements to this specific site with respect to a warehouse use would create a hardship. It's not that a warehouse is the only thing that can be built here, but a warehouse is a use that's contemplated in this district within the intent of the zoning code. If the parking requirements are applied, it would create a hardship for any warehouse on this site.
Well, I mean, but isn't it sort of a self-inflicted problem? Would a 250,000 square foot warehouse, have the same challenge, or would it be closer to what the bylaw requires? Well, I think by default it would be, but
I think we could look at that, and perhaps if we do come back before the zoning board, we could submit some calculations on the different size warehouses. But I think it gets to a point where the circumstances on the boundaries of the site, combined with the very large parking requirement, the building would need to be so small, and the parking would take up so much of the site that it wouldn't be essentially would rule out a warehouse use because it just the site would require so much more parking than would be necessary, particularly on this site where parking is limited to a smaller portion of the site based on the westerly area that we discussed and the utility constraints.
Yeah, and if I could just add to that, this is Richard Bakari from Churchill and Banks. I mean, I think on top of that, if you were to take it down to a smaller warehouse and have a very large parking lot that had 650 spaces to meet the bylaw, one, it would be extremely overparked and kind of a detriment to the environment by just having this excess runoff that's not necessary. But two, it creates a problem where to develop the site for a small portion of building footprint and a larger portion for parking footprint just becomes unusable. So, I mean, I know that may not be something that the board is values, but I think in reality and practicality, it's something that just doesn't make sense that, we'd be forced to build parking that's not needed to satisfy, a bylaw that's outdated and not, not applicable in today's world. So, I see, both sides of the coin here. But I think it's something that really needs to be looked at and thought through. And maybe there's a balance that can make sense. But as the bylaw is written, if we to apply it and stick to it 100%, it would create such a hardship that it's pretty unfeasible to do the deal.
I'd be interested to see what the planning board, what their feedback was and your response to that, because I think it's likely the same concerns that we're raising, probably.
Yes, as I mentioned, I think and I don't mean to interrupt. We do anticipate further feedback and continuing to work with not only the planning board but members of the local community. And certainly, if we can work through the issues, parking being one of them, we want to do that, and that's why we think it might make sense to come back for a later date. I will just say on the hardship piece. Hypothetically, could you imagine I'm not sharing the screen, so you all, well, I guess I can. I'll share my screen for just a moment here. This area to the left, could you imagine a plan with parking spaces if this area was graded and if we could even do it with the wetlands, the loss of all of this, the unnecessary loss of all of this kind of green space would seem to be a hardship in and of itself to me, particularly in light of the fact that it would really just be creating an unnecessary paved area that wouldn't be utilized for the parking for the building. But of course, we want to continue to work with the board. I think it makes sense to perhaps present some further calculations as was suggested, and we certainly willing to welcome further feedback from the other members.
Ms. Biswas, you have your hand up.
Yes, I'm sorry. I understand that this new parcel lot line is what it is, but can you just remind me or restate on the east side where the proposed parking lot is, the eastern lot line of what's called new parcel 2? Can you just explain why that's the lot line and what is that space that is further east on plan sheet G-2.1? Yes.
Sam, do you want to take that one? I think
sure, I'm happy to. So there are really two major constraints on the east side of the property. So the first and foremost, it's the requirements of Wyman Gordon, the existing facilities out there. Obviously, there's several hundred employees that and a number of trucks that enter the site. Their operations are being reconfigured to orient so that this corridor is an important element of this existing facility. So the road network is one. There's also a 12-inch gas main running that services that. Obviously, it's a large draw. And there's also a 12-inch water main in that same location. So the primary is the relationship of the properties working together to maintain a single entrance, to maintain the business end in a buffered way from the adjacent property. That was the primary impetus, but utilities are not insignificant.
Yep, understood. Thank you.
So, yeah, I have a couple comments. I've heard a couple of times comments about the unnecessary parking, and I really, it's not for us to decide whether the parking is unnecessary or not. Bylaw says you have to have it. If you really think it's unnecessary, then the proper thing to do is to gather up some citizens and put forth a citizen's petition to change the bylaw. That certainly is an option, right? If our bylaw is outdated, talk to the planning department. They'll be happy to help you change that bylaw to more appropriate. If the bylaw says you can put a warehouse, the fact that you have to have 700 parking spots or whatever it is, doesn't necessarily make a hardship that you can't create a warehouse, right? You can still build a warehouse. It may not be a 375,000 square foot warehouse, but you can put a warehouse here. Is what the bylaw calls for, is a warehouse. It doesn't call for modern warehouse 2021 style or something like that. It's a warehouse, so you could put one here. So it's not like the parking is preventing you from using this land. But you can still use it. You can still put a warehouse here. You can probably put a whole lot of other things here as well. Perhaps something that fits into the transportation and industry sector or whatever Wyman is in, so that you don't need as many spots. So, you know, there's got to be that uniqueness in the shape, topography, soil conditions, whatever. It then creates a hardship. Generally speaking, the hardship is that you can't do something with the land. And I'm not saying that at all. Further comments from the board? Just looking where'd my participants go. Anyone from the public want to speak? I see 9 attendees. Like to speak? Please raise your hand. Okay. I see one person is dialed in. Is there a way that we can make sure that person does or doesn't want to speak, Katrina?
I honestly don't know how to do that on this because they've called in through Zoom. I have no idea. Unless we unmute them or allow them to talk.
Yeah, unmute them. Can you unmute them?
That's
Well, I think we're going to continue this hearing anyways. So if that person does want to speak, I apologize and encourage you to reach out to us during the week and speak with Katrina and see if we can find a way to get you able to speak. I do see we have a raised hand, Ms. Manager. Allow her to speak, Katrina.
hold on. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Rosemarie Boulanger, 10 Fairlawn Street. I am an abutter, and I want to commend both the Planning Board and the Zoning Board of Appeals for their careful deliberation. I think that this has been an interesting discussion about the use. My major concern is both the size of the warehouse and the existing facade along Worcester Street, mainly for the neighborhood of Maplewood Drive. But it will definitely, you know, the height of the building, whether it turns out to be 35 or 40 square feet, is a concern at the intersection of light industrial and community. So I think that one of the things that I would like to see is if the parking does have to be increased, perhaps the parking could be along the front of Worcester Street with some shrubs that hide it. And the warehouse might be a 2-story warehouse. I mean, there are a lot of, you know, I've worked for architects, they're very creative people. There may be other ways to, you know, make the community happy and make the developer happy and have a win-win. But, you know, traffic notwithstanding, we had a great discussion with the planning board on Monday. So I just want to raise the concerns about this looming building on top of Maplewood. It's also going to affect people on Fairlawn, where they look out in their backyard and they're not going to see the sky. You know, they're going to see this hulking warehouse. And I think that you would see that more in a city or in an inner city. You would not see that in a bucolic bedroom community. So thank you for listening to my concerns. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Where'd my list of people go? Always move around here. So I don't see anyone else with their hand up at this point. Okay. Any other comments from the board at this point? Mr. Adams?
One last one on that western section. I'm looking at page 19 of 27, number CE 1-1. And to be honest, all I'm seeing is wetlands flags. Is that a forest with a stream or a swamp?
It is, I don't know if that can be heard. It is both. So there's a stream, there's a forest that has been wholly disturbed over the course of the last 70 years. But it is becoming an emergent based on the soils that were placed in that area. It's not native, it's fill. It's been altered and changed so long that it's beginning to get emergent species.
The whole northern half of it has wetlands flags. Could that be built on, or would conservation say no?
No, they would say no.
So that's basically useless land to build a parking lot on?
Correct.
Okay. So that could be construed as a hardship, maybe? I don't know.
Well, no. So, Peter, that would be something in the shape, topography, soil conditions, right? But it's those shape, topography, soil conditions need to be unique within the zoning district, and wetlands are not even close to unique within the zoning district or even the immediate district, right? We've got a lot of wetlands all around there, so.
I mean,
in my opinion, that doesn't rise to the level of something unique. I mean, wetlands is part of what we have here in town, and our bylaws were designed and written with that in mind.
They're also putting it into the purchase. If I was buying a piece of land, I don't think I'd want to buy the wetland part if I didn't have to.
Yeah, right. Okay, just actually want to just go back to Ms. Belanger's comments. We haven't really even talked about the third of the three tests to grant a variance, and that's the whole, not a detriment to the public good, that sort of thing. There could be a lot more there as well, but I think that's something we can talk about with a follow-on if we can even get past the first 2 points, in my opinion. So if no one else has anything to say, and I still don't see anyone's hands up, I just do want to acknowledge that we did receive communication. It's on our website, but we did receive comments from the fire department. Received comments from an abutter at 4 Donahue. A couple sets of comments from an abutter at 1 Balin Circle. Comments from abutters at 6 and 8 Fairlawn Street. And, we all have access to those. We all were sent those, and hopefully you've reviewed those. And I do want to take a moment to say something about the comments received from Mr. Holmes of Balin Circle. Katrina, so can I share yet?
You should be able to share. I've enabled sharing.
Yep. I just got to get the right window here. Nice, I'm sharing, and then all of a sudden you guys get in the way.
Should they be read in? Should they be read in?
Can you see my screen? Huh?
Should they be read into the meeting?
No, Peter, we don't do that anymore because of the volume of comments. Electronic media has kind of lent itself to a voluminous number of comments, so it's important that they're available ahead of the meeting. And as a matter of fact, there is a cutoff of 24 hours, something like that, and we acknowledge that we have them. But I just want to comment on Mr. Holmes's note that he sent in on Monday, September 13th. And at the end of his note, he says this: just because the ZBA does not live in this section of town, we should not be treated like second-class citizens just because we don't have the money like the rest of Grafton. And, I read that, and, I found that to be very insulting to the board. I've been on this board 20 years, and this board has always conducted themselves in the utmost integrity, sometimes painfully so, trying to do the right thing for the applicant and for the town in every single application that's come before us. I've never known us to operate in that manner. I don't like seeing people say things like that. I've had other attorneys and other professionals who have appeared before our board, the same professionals who appear in front of similar boards in multiple cities and towns throughout the Commonwealth, say to me offline that they're really impressed with what a good job this board does, and I'm very proud of that, and I think our board should be very proud of that. We hold ourselves to a very high standard every single time, and the idea that we would treat anyone differently in this town is wrong. Mr. Holmes, if he's listening, if you have a concern about the way we've conducted ourselves in this hearing or any other hearing, I invite you to give us specific examples and discuss it. If you're not comfortable doing that, then I invite you to reach out to the Ethics Commission at the Commonwealth level. Our secretary will be happy to give you a pointer to that information, or the town clerk or the town administrator or anyone else will be happy to point you in the right direction. I welcome anyone to scrutinize how this board has conducted itself. I don't think any of us feel we have anything to hide. So that's that. I'm going to stop sharing now. And unless anyone else has something to say, I think what we need to do is entertain a motion to continue. Did somebody have their hand up?
Yeah, this is Richard Bakari again. I just wanted to thank you guys for your time, and we'll take under advisement all the input that we received tonight, and we'd ask for a continuance of this hearing till, I guess, the November 4th meeting. Is that the next agenda? But in the meantime, we will dig in and do some due diligence and start to really take into account all the input that we heard tonight. And we do appreciate the town's opinions and the neighborhood's opinions. And we'll work to make the plan, as best we can to the point that we can make it work. But I just wanted to offer that tonight.
Thank you. So at this point, I'd entertain a motion to continue case number 877. Is that the right one? No, it's not. 876?
So moved.
876.
876. So a motion to continue case number 876. We might as well do it to 7:30 because we're going to have at least two cases ahead of it. So we'll do it to November 4th at 7:30. And I think Mr. Yeoman's made a motion.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? So then, as always, a roll call vote. Ms. Rogers, how do you vote?
Yes.
Ms. Reed?
Yes.
Mr. Yeomans?
Yes.
Mr. Waller?
Yes.
Chairman votes yes. Thank you very much, gentlemen. We'll see you all on November 4th.
Thank you, members of the board.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Mr. Chair, are you done with me?
I think so. I don't know. Is there anything? So we've also got Elm Rock and Providence Road, but I don't think there's any issues there that are of interest to you at this point, is there?
Excellent.
I think they're both looking for bond reductions and completions and that sort of thing.
Okay.
Good night, Robert.
Everybody have a great night. Thank you.
Night, Bob.
Good night.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's do Providence Road Commons. Is anyone here to talk about that?
Yes, Brian McEwen is.
Yeah, through the chair, Brian McEwen, Graz Engineering. Yeah, through a fairly long, extended process, we've been working to get the final checkoffs for Providence Road Commons project, and I believe with the final letters that we got from Jeff Walsh from Graves Engineering, that that we that we're at a final tipping point to get this thing put behind us. There are a couple of outstanding issues that Jeff pointed out in his final letter relative to completeness review. First, the as-built plans, he feels that those are complete and acceptable. And then finally, as far as the site inspection, we are working with Paul Canoia and the town's electrical contractor to install the 2 streetlights at Providence Road Common intersections where they were specified on the approved plans. That should be materializing in the next week or so. And then secondly, there were a couple touch-up issues that Jeff pointed out in his final letter with pictures relative to a small sinkhole behind one of the retaining walls, and then also some washout on a riprap at the plunge pool up by the golf course. Those are minor issues that can be taken care of, immediately. I would say within the same time frame as the streetlights. So, we're here to hopefully get this put behind us and get the board to move to accept it, maybe with the conditions that these final 3 items get checked off and we get letters to note the same from the individuals involved relative to that work.
So I guess I'm trying to figure out exactly what you need. You need us to say everything is complete, and then what does that allow you to do?
Well, what that would allow them to do is once they get a sign off from the board, I believe we would need to get you final plans for endorsement. I believe there was something in the permit that basically said we had to get you final product to sign, and then I think they need to be recorded, which is kind of odd for the as-built, but if necessary, that's what we'd take care of. But the big thing is it would allow the developer to get the releases for the last unit that's being held, so that he can get that on the market. That's a critical factor right now. That unit's been sitting empty for the better part of 2.5 years now. No fault of the board.
I had no idea. I didn't realize that there was actually a unit that was being held up. So here's my concern, though. Some of these things, like the streetlights in particular, have been out there for a while, and I guess I'm just kind of curious as why we would say you're complete at this point when you're not. And I understand you kind of said based on, complete based on, these things getting done, and that just seems kind of clumsy, to be honest. It just seems to me that, shouldn't we wait, get this stuff done, come back to us on November 4th, and, we get a letter from Graves saying everything's taken care of, and then we can, give you whatever it is that you need to say it's complete. It just seems kind of clumsy to say it's complete when it's not, or to say it's complete except for these things. And I'm not so sure that's really going to help you any.
Well,
I don't know.
at least we'd know that, we're at a point with the board that we're not going to come back on November 4th and these 3 things are done. And then the board decides, I don't know where the board would go with it. Okay, so I guess what we'd really want to know is, are we at a point where the board is comfortable that this project is going to be complete with those 3 items taken care of, rather than, go back and rehash everything that's been submitted and find some type of little caveat that needs to be addressed again. So we're trying to, keep it moving and get it done with the fact that we, got this far along.
Yeah, I think the way the board generally operates is we rely on Graves to tell us things are completed. There is the issue of any sort of requirements that are in the comprehensive permit, and quite frankly, we rely on you, the applicant, to make sure that you've done everything that the comprehensive permit says you have to do, and it's up to the zoning enforcement officer to, enforce that, right? We're not an enforcement board. We don't necessarily get involved in enforcing and make sure you've done everything that the comprehensive permit says you need to do. I think the comprehensive permit says we need to sign off on the final plans. I believe we have some sort of sign-off responsibility at this point here. So, as long as this is what Graves is saying needs to be done, I think when this is done, then we would check that box, and if we need to make a motion or send a letter, we would do that. I think you're there. It's just, let's get this stuff done. It's the way I'm looking at it. Especially if it's, if that's really all that needs to happen here.
Very good. I mean, the only issue I could see would be relative to the street lights and National Grid, turning the lights on. So my understanding is Paul Canoia from the town was working with Providence Road Commons, Peter Maloney, to get that coordinated with the town electrical contractor, because they're going to be town street lights, not part of the homeowners association lights. So they're going to be the responsibility of the town ultimately. So that's the only issue that could, I would think that could hold things up, that we wouldn't be, have that complete before November 4th, knowing how National Grid moves.
Yeah, and if you come back to us November 4th and these other things are done and the only thing left is street lights, I think we can probably work. I feel more comfortable doing some sort of a condition based on just, getting street lights turned on or something like that. Versus everything that's in this list here. But I'd welcome feedback from the board. Anyone else have anything? Mr. Yeomans, I see you raising your finger.
I just have one question. As I recall the process over the past few years, just make sure that the plans show that you don't have that school bus stop, which we approved the removal of that, which, you all sought. So when you bring those plans in to sign it, or your as-built, hopefully that will be removed from the plans.
I assume Mr. Walsh is on top of that, right?
I'm here, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Jeff Walsh with Graves Engineering. Yes, the as-built plans do not show the bus stop, or whatever we want to call it. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to remind the members of the board, I am not the only person involved with the construction of this. I've done everything I can within the jurisdiction that was charged to me, which is monitor construction of the drainage system. I call them the roadways, and general compliance with the conditions of the comprehensive permit, so that, from an engineering perspective. But the letter that I issued does speak to the three things that Mr. McEwen mentioned. And quite frankly, I don't know where the fire department stands or conservation. I think they're both those department and boards. I understand they're in good shape, but I'm not not everything funnels through our office. I've handled this project like I have all the others, and I'm one piece of the puzzle, if you will. So I just wanted to share that with you. But all in all, from my perspective on the civil engineering, the construction, and so on and so forth, my letter is very short. There's been a lot of interaction over many, many years, and some issues have come up. But the short of it is, I'm very comfortable with the construction status as I know it.
Good point. Thank you. So to our secretary, Katrina, is somebody within the building department tracking what needs to get finished and signed off?
I've created a checklist. So I've talked to Leah. They're getting ready to issue their final conditions that they had asked for. So she said they've issued them, but they haven't been signed the last time I talked to her, but they are getting ready, that they've made everything up there. I've gotten the final letter from Paul Canoia that they're okay on the sewer. I've gotten a final sign off, I believe, on water, that they're okay up there. Fire did send a thing that they've met everything. But there's one fire hydrant that's blocked by vegetation and is extremely difficult to see. They need to, remove the plant or create a means for the fire department to be able to find that fire hydrant. And the only other thing on the checklist I had was, they never gave the ZBA an outline of the approved landscaping site plan. So which was condition D5, and condition D4 was, did they create the 2 passive rec areas and are they delineated on the approved plans? That's section D4, the comprehensive permit. Section D5 was, have they completed the landscaping shown on the site plan? We never got a landscaping plan, so they're supposed to give that to us on the as-built, and that's what you guys have to sign off on. That's also condition D7. And then condition D10 was a 15-foot wide landscaping area shall be installed along the perimeter of the site where practical, excluding areas surrounding units 10, 11, 12, and 27. Again, it's saying landscaping shall be installed per the approved plans, but we never got any plans to approve. So we just have to make sure that's done and you guys approve what they've done on the final as-built. And once all that's done, then Bob can release, because here is the actual building permit card, the final unit, which was started in 2015. The building permit card was issued.
Brian, the things that Katrina just said, is that news to you guys, or?
No, what I would say is conservation. I spoke with them. They were holding they had voted the approval of the certificate of compliance for the project back in July, and they were waiting for a final site inspection from Jeff and final as-built plans. We received those from Jeff this week and submitted. And I spoke with Jan yesterday. They were finalizing the COC for the conservation so they could sign it. And she said it would probably be available Monday or Tuesday of this coming week. Relative to the fire department issue, there is a little bit of brush that needs to be cleared around that one hydrant. What he made it sound like was that you couldn't even see the hydrant, but physically walking the site with Jeff and Chris from planning, it wasn't as bad as I think the comment made it out to be. So that can be cleared up. The couple issues that I presented that Jeff had in his final completeness review from his site inspection, that can be taken care of. The landscaping, when we submitted our initial request for certificate of completion from the Zoning Board of Appeals, we offered that we would present on the as-built plans the landscaping that is in place currently when we submitted the initial plan, which is still the same today, in lieu of the landscape plan that was never presented to the board back at the beginning of the project for review and approval by the board. So it was always the intent that the as-built plan that you have in front of you now showed enough detail to show that the landscape has been completed and meets your requirements. If we need to give the board pictures throughout the whole site, we can do that. But that's something that we had always intended that this plan would be in lieu of the plan that was never submitted to the board at the beginning of the project.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm looking at it now, and I do. I think I'm seeing landscaping, all over these plans that are submitted.
And I'd maybe ask Jeff he walked it just recently. He could probably share his views. I mean, I'm not a landscape architect, but it looks pretty nice, I think, for the small development that it is.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'm an engineer, not a landscape architect, but nevertheless, I was impressed with the landscaping as far as, it certainly did not look like there was a short changing of landscape features throughout the site. I was comfortable with it. I did look at the site distances from the two exits to make sure I was comfortable that landscaping didn't get in the way. And on the southern exit, I wanted to make sure the brush clearing that I requested a number of years ago and was done then hadn't grown back in and was blocking sight line, and that looked fine. But walking through the site, just my general opinion based upon visual is that, the landscaping seemed appropriate for a project like that. Certainly wasn't shortchanged, and wasn't to the point it was blocking problems or so on and so forth, walkways and things like that. With respect to the buffer around the perimeter, I remember that discussion all those years ago, and Mr. Adams was involved with those discussions, but nevertheless, there was a certain units that there was going to be some grading where the natural buffer was getting cut into near the property line or to the property line. And again, I think to the best of my knowledge, the perimeter was kept with the buffer, except along the golf course area, but there was work on both sides of the property line to address some drainage issues that occurred well after construction got underway. But in short, I didn't see any problematic areas with respect to buffering or landscaping.
And through the chair, finally, what I'd add is the as-built plans clearly designate the two recreational areas that were shown on the approved design plans. So the final as-built indicate those two areas. One being down near where a bus drop-off would have been near the postal box. And then the other one up at the flat area on the top of the loop road over the underground drainage detention facility. And those were the areas that were designated on the approved plans.
So, it sounds to me like we're there, right? So get these things wrapped up and come back on the 4th and should be able to, basically, I guess all we really need to do is acknowledge a completeness at this point.
Correct. And I feel good that you understand the national grid issue, because I deal with this on other projects, and that usually ends up being a snafu that we can't get through really quick. So hopefully it will materialize quickly this time.
Yep. Is there any, do we still have any bond or tripartite or any money being held?
I think so. I'd have to look into it. I think there is a little bit still left on it, but let me look into it.
Yeah, I would think so, but okay. All right. Very good. Anything else? Thank you. Next up would be Elm Rock. I see Steve here.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Happy to make a brief, informative presentation if necessary, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, please let us know who you are first, and then tell us why you're here. And
Great.
What do you...
Thank you. On behalf of Wheel Rock LLC, I'm Steve O'Connell from Turning Point Engineering, requesting a bond reduction on their behalf. Submitted a written request to reduce the infrastructure bond, which was currently set at $323,000 to an amount to be determined by the board based on an updated engineer's opinion of cost estimate prepared by Graves Engineering. And also part of the request was a reduction of the stabilization bond. But I do want to clarify, I did make a mistake in my request. I had forgotten that the board reduced the bond back in April down to a sum of $29,000. So I was under the impression it was still at $224,000. But so I apologize. The current bond for the stabilization is at 29,000. So our request is still that it goes down to zero, but it's just not as drastic of a reduction. So again, quick summary: looking to reduce the infrastructure bond to an amount to be voted on by the board based on Jeff's report received today, and reduce the stabilization bond to the $29,000 balance that it is down to $0, which again was a separate report prepared by Jeff today, and happy to discuss Jeff's reports. Thank you.
So it probably makes sense to let Jeff speak at this point. You know, I see that we have two different letters. Why don't you tell us what's going on here, please?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. For the record, I'm Jeff Walsh with Graves Engineering, working for the Zoning Board of Appeals and Building Inspector. Yes, this project has two different requirements for surety. One of them will start with the erosion control, site stabilization, and interim stormwater management. That's a surety. That surety is for basically battening down the hatches if the developer leaves the site and erosion control is left unattended. And that comes in very early in the process when they're breaking ground. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to report to you and the board that the project is stabilized now, and we're not recommending any money to be held for that whatsoever. Temporary erosion control barriers, stabilization, temporary settling basins, and so on and so forth are no longer necessary. Topsoil and seed has been placed and vegetation is established, and we're very comfortable with making that dollar value completely go away if that's acceptable to the board. The second piece of this is what we might call the infrastructure surety. This is the amount that normally a planning board would hold for a subdivision. This is for utilities and access to the site and completing the site if the developer does not complete the site. There's a few little things left to do, a few monuments, as-built plans and acceptance plans. But Mr. Chairman and members of the boards, even with 20% contingency, 20% applied to the construction value for contingencies, inflation, and administration, we come to $17,000 worth of uncompleted work, if you will, that's remaining throughout that subdivision. Basically, again, in the form of a few bounds, not all of them, just a few of them. That work's still underway. Acceptance plans and as-built plans. Earlier in the summer or late spring, we'd updated the surety amount at that time, shortly after or shortly before they placed the top coat of pavement on the road. Back at that time, there was still some areas that needed to be loamed and seeded. Work was still progressing, and that work has been completed. So again, there's about $17,000 worth of surety that should be held for the purpose of work that needs to be completed. And then in addition to that, there's the subdivision rules and regs call for not releasing more than 20% of the total cost of the construct project. So that's why on the left side of our cost estimates, we carry values that's called 100% cost to construct. And that 20% value comes at $323,000. So in short, there's about $17,000 worth of work to do. And if the board is going to follow the subdivision rules and regulations, we'd probably be holding about $323,000 worth of work.
Which is exactly what we're holding now.
Okay. Yep.
So, excuse me. So, I guess I'm trying to understand what you're saying, Jeff, is that at what point would the planning board release that $323,000?
To the best of my knowledge, that would occur after the project was determined at least after the project was voted by the planning board to be determined to be complete, possibly as late as once it's formally accepted by the town and possibly conveyed to the town. I am not sure exactly when that surety is released.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't know if the town planner would be able to help us out on this. I think he probably would. I am out of the loop when the planning board makes its votes on the 40A subdivisions.
Yeah. You know what? I got to be honest. Yeah, unless somebody on the board has some input on it, I would. I'm not comfortable releasing that 323 based on what Jeff's telling us. I think I'd like to have a conversation with the town planner to understand better when we should release that. And I assume that our comprehensive permit doesn't necessarily speak to it. Okay. So that's my thinking. Comments from the board? So what I'm hearing is from Jeff that the 29,000, that was a number, I seem to have lost it here.
Yeah, for the stabilization, 29.
Yeah, somewhere it's around here. 29,000 for stabilization. You know, I think we probably could release that. But I'm not in a hurry to do the 323. And I'd like some input from the town planner on that. Anyone else have an opinion on it?
If no one from the board has anything to add, because you touched on it, Mr. Chairman, that there's nothing in the comprehensive permit that states that, you're correct. You know, I've scoured it in preparation of that part of the discussion, because it's in Graves's bond. And early on in the bond process, you know, Jeff had to explain to me why that was in there, and his experience with the planning board is that, you know, that's the way the bonds are prepared, but not. I know you're acting as the planning board in capacity because of the 40B, but there is no provision in the comprehensive permit that indicates that bonding will follow, you know, subdivision regulation section, whatever it may be. Now, there is a provision in the comprehensive permit that talks about acceptance of the way, and it references subdivision regulations regarding the procedures for road acceptance. But that's it. So, you know, it is obviously a lot of money to be holding for a project that is, you know, pretty. I'll even use the word substantially complete.
Yeah.
I know my client would be happy to triple the amount that Jeff has indicated, you know, just to get a reduction, you know, 323,000 just sitting there. And that's in some cases it's not a cash bond, you know, it's a policy, and it doesn't mean anything to some developers, but in this case that's a cash bond, and you know, the bank's just holding it. So if there's any consideration from the board, it'd be appreciated.
Yeah, so let me say this. So when Katrina reached out to me a couple of days ago and said that Elm Rock wanted to get on our agenda, my initial reaction was no. It's too late. We got too much going on.
Okay.
But I said we'll squeeze in. And you know, we're gonna go at the end of the night. Let's see what we can do. So good news is you're here. The good news is we know we have a little bit of work to do to make sure we're in sync with the planning department on when this gets released. So let's just table this until our next meeting. We will reach out to the planning board, the planning department, make sure we're all on the same page, and we can do the right thing on November 4th, which is probably when you should have been coming anyways. At least now we know what we need to do before we get there. That's my thinking.
Sure, and you guys have been always great to work with, and you're the last board I would argue with, just because of how, you know, cooperative you are, and you know how hard you work in you know, doing your duty here. Would the board consider acting on the stabilization bond request reduction?
Yeah, I think we're good with that. So let's just get some feedback from other members. Mr. Yeomans?
No, I just have a question of Steve. In driving through there, I just want to make sure that the line of sight exiting as you look up the hill, that whatever we required for that line of sight, I just seemed, when I'm driving out of there, I seem like it's restricted, like there's more stuff there than should be there. I don't know if that's the case or not, but if you'd look at that, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely happy to look at it. I don't recall any specific things that needed to happen, but I will, Bill, take a fresh look before the November meeting.
Thank you.
Did somebody else? Did I see someone else's hand up? Any other comments from the board? So, hearing none, I can just get back to Jeff's letter. All right, so for the site stabilization, stormwater management, it must say in here somewhere what the current amount is.
Not in my
Why am I
letter,
not-
Mr. Chairman. No, not in my letter.
Oh, it's not?
No, my letter's basically
Okay.
saying this is what I recommend. I'm not always privy to what a board votes,
Okay.
so I'm
Got it.
reluctant to put it in the letter.
No, I understand that. That makes perfect sense. So I'd entertain a motion to reduce the site stabilization and stormwater management bond for Elm Rock Estates to $0.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Chairman, I was
Motion
gonna, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to butt in. I was even gonna, whereas the dollar value is 0, I don't know if it would be, I assume it would not be inappropriate to release the surety or to vote it to 0 and then release it, because it's not gonna go back up.
Yeah, so, okay. And this is where not being a lawyer hurts me, I guess. So, yeah, so I guess maybe the reduce it to 0 and release the surety.
I amend my motion to that statement.
Second.
Steve, it sound good to you?
Yes, that's exactly correct. I concur.
Okay. Any other comments from the board? And on a roll call vote, Ms. DeRosiers?
Yes.
Reed?
Yes.
Yeomans?
Yes.
Mr. Waller?
Yes.
Chairman votes yes. So that part of it's released, and then we'll see you on November 4th, and I'll reach out to the town planner. It may not hurt for you to reach out as well, Steve.
Yeah.
But we'll try and get in sync on that so that we can do the right thing for you on November.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you. I appreciate you squeezing me in tonight for this, and we will see you at the next meeting.
Excellent.
Right.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, are you all set with me this evening?
I believe we are. Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate it. Have a good night.
You're welcome. Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Good night, Jeff.
Nine.
Night, Jeff.
All right, so our next order of business is case number 875, which is 3 Centennial Drive, a variance for the IDEX building. I'm going to waive reading of the minutes of the legal notice and the rules. This case has requested a withdrawal of that variance. Unless anyone has any objections to letting them withdraw, I'd entertain a motion to allow case number 875 to withdraw their petition without prejudice.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Is anyone not able to vote? Any of the 5 sitting members have any conflict of interest with IDEX or 3 Centennial Drive? So roll call vote. Ms. DeRosiers?
Yes.
Ms. Reed?
Yes.
Yeomans?
Yes.
Mr. Waller?
Yes.
Chairman votes yes. I think motion to end or close case number 875, please.
So moved.
Second,
Motion made and seconded. Roll call vote again. Mr. Rogers?
yes.
Ms. Reed?
Yes.
Yeoman,
Mr.
yes.
Yeoman? Mr. Waller?
Yes.
Chairman votes yes. Next up is reorganization. Entertain nomination for chairman, please.
I like to make a motion that we
Nominate.
nominate Brian Waller as a chairman for the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Any other nominations? So I guess we just do a roll call and say
Need a
that you
second.
vote. Do we?
You
Somebody want
need
to
a
second that
second.
nomination? Well, I'll second it. I can do that.
Yeah.
We'll just do a roll call. Is anyone else care to nominate anyone else? Okay, just a roll call to reaffirm the vote, I guess. Just stating who you vote for. We'll start with Mr. Rogers.
That works for me. I think Brian will do fine, so yes.
Ms. Reed?
Yes, agreed.
Mr. Yeomans?
Yes, agreed. And you are destined to stay around.
Mr. Waller, I'd say it's your last chance to get out, but
As long as you're sticking around.
Chairman votes yes. Welcome
That's
aboard to our new chairman.
Woohoo! That's great.
If you want, I'll just finish out the evening driving. So we need a nomination for vice chairman, please.
I'd like to nominate Mary Ann DeRocha to continue as vice chair.
I'll second that. Any other nominations? So again, we'll do the roll call to reaffirm that. Mary Ann?
That's fine with me. Thank you. Yes.
Ms. Reed?
Yes.
Mr. Yeoman?
Yeoman, yes.
Mr. Waller?
Yes.
Chairman votes yes for Mr. Rogers. And then lastly, entertain nominations for clerk.
I would like to nominate Kay Reed to continue as clerk.
Even though
The
I
ZBA?
can't find my case numbers.
I second
Yeah,
that.
we thought that was a purposeful thing you did tonight, so you wouldn't.
Too many papers.
Yeah.
Anyway, no. Anyway.
You got to do a lot worse than that.
Make
It's a
make
tough
believe you're at a
job.
closing.
It's a really tough job. It's fine.
I need a second on that.
Yeah, you got a second from me. I seconded it.
Okay.
Any other nominations? Again, on a roll call, Mr. Rogers.
Yes.
Ms. Reed.
Yeah, sure. I accept.
Yeoman,
Mr.
yes.
Yeoman.
Yes.
Mr. Waller.
Yes.
Chairman votes yes. Okay, we've reorged. It's later than I want it to be, so I'm going to push off minutes, make it Brian's problem for the next meeting. We do have two new cases. We'll schedule both of those for the 4th, and then we've got the continuation of Wyman, and then Elmrock will be with us. It doesn't sound too bad of a night.
Don't forget 4 Gloucester too. She
again?
continued. 4 Gloucester.
Oh, for Gloucester as well. Yeah, so that's pretty full at that point. So hopefully we don't have any more cases coming in. But regardless.
Are the cases what are the cases, Katrina?
One's a variance for a shed, and the other one is to change the use of a building from residential to a mixed use, like office and commercial and residential.
Pre-existing non-conforming use change. Yeah. Variance for a shed, you gotta love it. Anything else that we need to discuss before we close out this evening?
No, I'd just like to comment as a past chair, Bill. I understood that you wanted a slight change, but you have to be here at every meeting to continue to offer guidance to all of us as we help our new chair, Brian, and Mary Ann, and our clerk who needs a remedial, I think, help with the. But we'll send her to class. But thank you for your continued service, Bill, and thank you so much for pointing out that very inappropriate comment tonight. That comment that was made, over an email about. I think those were heartfelt words. And looking over the past 20 years, I think you deserve a lot of praise for that direction.
Yeah, I'm very proud of. I'm very proud of the way this board's behaved, and we had one other comment like that years ago from actually a former member of the board that got under my skin a little bit. But I don't like people saying those things about this board because that's just not even close to, it's just not how we operate.
And
by
Bill,
the way, that same gentleman actually did send in a different letter, and I'm a little surprised, Katrina, that it's not up on the website. That letter was responded to by our town administrator, but he questioned.
I can put it in as public record. That's not a problem.
Yeah,
I didn't know if I should. Huh?
Yeah, I think it should be. I think it should be. It's related to the case, but he was actually challenging the idea of why this meeting was 100% remote, and claiming that we didn't have the right to do that. But he sent that to a number of boards, I think, and our town administrator reached out to us, and me in particular, and said, don't respond, I will respond on behalf of the town. So you probably should make sure both Evan's response and the initial letter get posted.
Okay, I'll print them tomorrow and put them in. Yep.
hey,
Okay.
and Bill, I want to add that
Yeah.
I've been doing this 7.5 years. It'll be 8 years next March. And you've been amazing. Your leadership has been invaluable just from what I've seen sitting on the sidelines. I don't contribute a ton, but you've been excellent. And I know Brian's going to follow in your shoes and do really great. But I've been so impressed with the way you've handled this board throughout. So thank you for your service. It's been amazing. And we're glad you're still going to be there because we need you.
I'm not going anywhere. It's healthy. It's healthy for the board for this role to change, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
We should try to
And thanks,
rotate it.
Brian, for stepping up. That's awesome.
Yes, I appreciate that.
Big shoes to fill.
Yeah, it's great. It's going to be great. Cool.
All right. Anything else? If not, entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
We got to do roll call again. So, Ms. DeRosiers,
Yes.
Ms. Reed,
Yes.
Yeomans,
Yes.
Mr. Waller,
Yes.
Chairman votes yes. Oh, Katrina, who's in the booth?
Bill Robidoux.
Mr. Robidoux, thank you very much for your time this evening. We appreciate it. You have a good night. Good night, everyone.